My name is Bruce Mercer, and this is my story. Marrying Camille was a whirlwind, exciting in some moments, frustrating in many, and in the end, painful. I never felt like I was married after 2 years. I lived up to my vows, and she never seemed to embrace the idea of commitment. Camille had her own priorities: to look good, to have a career, to get a master's degree, and to have a future in the country. Everything was about her goals, her wishes. I was there, but never at the center of her world. 5 feet 4 inches in height, the blonde hair fell down her back. A very small waist complemented a clear Middle Eastern, Eurasian mark on her face, and most importantly, with green eyes to die for, seemingly asking from across the room. And then, she had this confident stride, exuding an energy that commanded rather demanded attention. I felt spellbound the first time at her independence and charms, and felt she was a unique breed. But in time, I came to realize that what I took for confidence was actually a reflection of how little she ever worried about the feelings of anyone else. There was an emotional distance between us. I don't remember her ever telling me that she loved me. She never offered displays of affection. I have to question now if what we had was ever true. It was like we lived in some sort of illusion, acting out the roles but not truly living. I had been living in an illusion, lying to myself that things were much better than they actually were. Perhaps I simply did not want to face the reality. She never was the quiet, intimate type. She liked excitement, energy, something intense. I, on the other hand, longed for a deeper connection, one that went beyond just being together under the same roof. But she never gave me that. No comfort, no warmth. I gave her my loyalty, my devotion, and she remained distant. I did my best to provide for her, to give her the life she wanted, but no matter how hard I tried, it wasn't enough. I sank into debt, trying just to keep her satisfied with her expectations. We dined out so much that my kitchen just sat there. I am a high school teacher, making a decent income but by no means rich. I could never compete with the lifestyle she dreamed of, the country clubs, the luxury, the excess, and she made it clear my best efforts didn't measure up. When I met her 4 years ago, she was a nanny, and I was drawn in by her beauty, her intelligence, her independence. At least that's what I thought it was. Later, I would come to learn that this independence of hers only served the purpose of establishing her license to do whatever she pleased, without consideration for the feelings of others. Selfish from the beginning, and I just did not want to see it. I was like a moth drawn to a flame, knowing the danger, yet not being able to resist. I should have walked away the first week I met her. Still, something in me wanted to believe in her, to believe that there was more to her than what was apparent. Maybe I was just lying to myself. So why did I stay? Why did I put up with her coldness, her indifference for so long? All my life I had taken pride in the fact that I was a man of strength. But in retrospect, I have to consider now the possibility that my patience disguised a weakness all along. I had promised her father back in Turkey that I would take care of her, protect her, and give her a stable life. And I wanted to keep my word. Always I thought of him as a good and honorable man, someone who had no idea what kind of person his daughter truly was. Already bringing up twin sons from a previous marriage that failed, I didn't want to get divorced all over again. I was bound and determined to make this work, to give it every chance. I wanted a home, a steady life, a partner to share in it. I had convinced myself I had it, until the reality forced me otherwise. She stood in front of the mirror getting dressed to go out one Friday evening. There was nothing unusual about it, but she merely glanced at me as she spoke. "I don't want any arguments, Bruce. It is over between us. You do know that. I need my friends." Tired of the same lame excuse, I sighed. "You mean your boyfriend? I heard the majority of your phone conversation this morning. If he calls my house one more time, I will throw both of you and the phone out of the window." She barely blinked. "Don't get jealous. You know we can't stay together." I shook my head. "I'm not jealous. You told me 4 months ago that you wanted to live your own life. So why are you still here? You being under this roof keeps me from moving forward. My patience is finished. Enough testing." She sighed, slipping on her shoes, her voice without emotion. "Don't worry, I'll be gone soon." She was looking stunning. The deep red of her lips, the elegant perfume she was wearing, and not least, the sleek black dress she had chosen for tonight, left no doubt that effort had been applied. But she wasn't dressing up for me, and she was about to go out the door to meet another man without a care in the world, that I knew it. I had always treated her with patience, with kindness, far more than she ever deserved. But that patience was now at an end. The blatant disrespect, not just to me, but also to my sons, was something I would no longer tolerate. I had held on for far too long, convinced myself that things could work out, that she would change. But now, the truth stood right in front of me, wrapped in arrogance and self-importance. The anger in me simmered as I watched her prepare to leave. I couldn't bite my tongue anymore. What's gotten into you? How did we get here? What did I do to deserve this treatment? Did you really think I would continue to put up with this? To you, your social life has always been more important than your marriage. I've had it with your lies for far too long, but tonight, I just can't pretend. You have made me and your sons feel like we mean nothing in your life. She didn't even look at me as she picked up her purse, and the indifference cut deeper than words. You really gambled on that promise I made to your father, didn't you? You counted on my sense of honor, on my having been taught to keep it. You took my loyalty for granted and manipulated it against me. You never once brought an income into the household, paid a single bill. I subsidized you through MBA, through all those worthless jobs you floated from one to the next. But now you find yourself a slot in some investment bank, and now I'm cramping your style, is it? She exhaled a long, exasperated sigh, and then in a tone so casual it chilled me to the bone, said, I hate being around your sons. I never wanted them here. Every time you wrote a check for their child support, I could barely stand it. And now, they're here full-time, and I'm supposed to be their mother? No, Bruce, that's not the life I signed up for. And you lack ambition. You're just a simple man who wants a simple life. I need more than you can give. That was it. I stepped forward, my voice low but firm. My sons are not a leech, and if you have one shred of sense in your head, you will never refer to them as such again. You have 1 week to get your belongings out of my house. After that, anything that belongs to you is finding its way into the garbage. Next Friday, you are no longer welcome in my home. I am no longer bound by the vows I made to your father. We're done. For the first time, something in her expression shifted. Shock. Maybe she was beginning to realize that the man she had manipulated and controlled no longer existed. That man was gone. I was grateful that my sons were at my sister's house for a couple of weeks. They didn't have to witness this. They did not have to hear the words streaming from this woman's lips. I felt ashamed to my soul that I had ever left them around someone like her. She tilted her head, studying me like I was a puzzle she couldn't quite figure out. You've changed, she muttered. I tried to shrug off the unease in my chest, the hollowness brought on by the finality of admitting to something I'd been blind to for far too long. It was no longer love. It had been slowly strangled to death over a very long period. Yet even in this moment, there was an odd, clingy attachment, one last thread that held on where so many were broken. Attachment, but certainly not affection. An aching tie to a person who was taking up room in my life. I let out a sharp exhale. I've had enough of your disrespect. I just want to understand something. When did you start believing you were better than me? Where did you get this idea you're superior? Because from where I stand, you're nothing other than an arrogant, selfish woman who has managed to throw away everything that could have ever been good in her life. She crossed her arms, rolling her eyes. Oh, come on, Bruce. Your kids were dumped on you by their mother, and you, in turn, dumped them on me. And honestly, you never had money. You spent everything you had on them. I don't hate you. I just don't care enough to feel anything about you at all. Some part of me still has a little affection for you, sure. But love? I never loved you, Bruce. I deserve more than this life. I should never have married a man with children. I need someone who can give me his full attention. She shrugged, as if she had just explained something as self-evident as the weather. The truth is, I married you for convenience. I needed a green card. I needed a place to stay while I sorted out my life. And you gave me all of that. I know it's cold, but that's just how it is. You served your purpose. Now I have my career, my independence. I don't need you anymore. She smirked, adjusting her dress. I may miss a few things, but not much. I've already found someone who gives me what I really need. She did not know that I was recording everything. What was that all about? She was driving the nail in deeper, pushing just to see how much more I could take. It took every ounce of my self-discipline not to react. Years of martial arts training had taught me control, but right now, that control was being tested. I wanted to throw her out of my house, to to toss her into the street where she belonged, but I wasn't going to let her bait me. I took a deep breath and asked, "Did you ever love me?" She gave me a slow, wicked smile but said nothing. That smirk was all the answer I needed. She didn't even have the decency to lie about it. She knew exactly what she was doing, prolonging the moment, savoring the effect it had on me. Then, as if on cue, a car horn sounded from outside. I blew out a hard breath. "You're a real piece of work. You should count your blessings I didn't toss you out months ago," I growled, so tired and so disgusted. She rolled her eyes. "Don't wait up. I probably won't be back tonight," she said in mock. And then, just when things couldn't get weirder, the doorbell rang. So, this guy she was running around with behind my back had the audacity to come right to my front door. I opened it. "Is Camille here?" he asked, an arrogant smirk plastered on his face. Then he gave a low chuckle. "So, you're the guy who can't keep his own wife in check." Without waiting for an invitation, he pushed past me and stepped into my house. I knew his name, Felix Osborne. He was working with Camille, she being his direct supervisor at the bank. What she probably did not know, or perhaps did not care about, was that Felix was engaged to a rich, recently divorced woman who had 2 children of her own. I wondered if Camille was aware of that little detail. Camille sauntered down the stairs, stopping just beside him. She smiled at me smugly. "My loving husband just threatened to kick me out. He says I have 1 week to pack up and leave. What do you think about that, Felix?" Felix puffed out his chest. "I think I should knock some sense into him for upsetting you," he said, glaring at me. I tossed my head back and gave him the sort of smile a predator gives to its prey. "I'd love for you to try, preferably in front of witnesses. It would be a pity if your fiancée became a widow before she even got married." Something in my tone rattled him. The confidence in his stance wavered just slightly. Camille, however, remained unfazed. She had clearly already told him that I had some martial arts training, but she chose to downplay it, probably to keep his ego intact. I debated whether I should tell him just how well-versed I was in Kali, a close-quarters combat art. I decided to let him underestimate me. "Never mind him, Felix. Let's go," Camille said, looping her arm around his. She shot me a taunting glance. "He thinks he's tough because he knows a few moves, but I want him to sit here and think about the fact that I've already moved on." Felix smirked, puffing himself up again. "Another time, wimp, another time." I thought about telling her to stay gone, but I kept quiet. I needed a bit more time to get things moving, a few more days, and neither of them would be getting away scot-free. Poor Felix had no idea how close he'd just come to making an extremely costly mistake. He stood about 4 inches taller than me and outweighed me by at least 20 pounds, which was all that contributed to his overconfidence. What he didn't know was just how easily I could take him apart if I wanted to. But he would learn. Then, as if he hadn't done enough damage already, he leaned in with a smug grin. "She ever mention how comfortable your bed is?" His voice was laced with arrogance, fishing for a reaction. I met his smirk with one of my own. "You must feel special. Tell me, was there a waiting list?" His face darkened and he surged toward me, but Camille pulled on his arm, which was fortunate for him. I watched as his Lexus pulled away from the curb, my mind already going over what was to be done next. I knew everything about him: name, address, phone number, and even where he worked. More importantly, I had proof. Dozens of emails, explicit and not, painted the picture of their betrayal in real colors. But if that wasn't enough, I had public photos of them together, making what any employer would find questionable moves. Most especially, Camille seemed to enjoy the thrill of it, using public spaces as if the relationship was some sort of power move. She thought she was untouchable, wrong. I was not going to harm her, as that would have been too easy. But I was going to make sure she could not continue doing this, to me, to my sons, or anyone else. They were twins and only 4 years old, too young to understand why Camille had never shown them any kindness, too innocent to know that she never wanted them in her life. I hated myself for letting them be around her for as long as I did. They had come to live with me full-time 2 years ago when their mother abandoned them. She dropped them off and vanished, never looking back. I had spent every waking moment since then trying to convince them that it wasn't their fault, that they were wanted, that they were loved. And now, I would make sure that Camille was nothing but a distant memory. But then, Camille's refusal to spend time around my sons had turned out to be a blessing in disguise. It gave me the chance to give all my time to trying to be the best father I could. They were my world, and our bond was as strong as ever. But as much as I could, I focused on them, and I couldn't ignore what should be done. It was too much on my wife's side and her so-called boyfriend's side. I was not really into revenge, but that time I made an exception. Call it justice, retribution, anything, for which I was allowing myself to see this thing through. The divorce papers were already in process. My lawyer would have them ready in a few days. I knew Camille had assumed she could keep this charade going forever, stringing me along while she enjoyed her double life. But she had underestimated me. She probably thought she could walk away on her own terms whenever it suited her. That wasn't going to happen. Fortunately, there wasn't much she could take from me. I'd had my house before we ever met, and except for a modest mutual fund and my future pension, there wasn't much for her to get her hands on. She was dependent upon my stability far more than she would ever admit, and now she was about to lose it all. The next stop in my program led me to the Department of Immigration and Naturalization. I was to see a Miss Dalton. As I approached her cubicle, I expected some government drone popular use, a tired, overworked, disinterested drone. Instead, I found myself momentarily stunned. She was beautiful. No, more than that, she was striking. Her jet black hair framed her face perfectly. Her brown eyes were sharp yet warm. And when she smiled, it was enough to make me forget, for just a second, why I was even there. After everything I had been through, I hadn't expected to feel anything like this again. "Mr. Mercer," she greeted me with a polite smile, extending her hand. "Please, have a seat. I understand you're here to report a case of immigration fraud. Is that correct?" For a moment, I didn't answer. I was lost in her eyes. Something in me had been asleep for a long time, and now, without warning, it was awake again. It took me a second to pull myself together. I cleared my throat. "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you're so much lovelier than I thought you'd be. I hope that's not too forward." She blinked in surprise before a soft blush crept up her cheeks. She looked down briefly, as if composing herself. "Thank you, Mr. Mercer," she said, smiling small. "That's very kind of you. I haven't heard a compliment like that in a while." Then, going professional, "But let's get down to business. Why are you here today?" I didn't waste any time. I told her everything. My soon-to-be ex-wife married me only for the sake of obtaining a green card. She never loved me. She never planned on a life with me. Since the beginning, it has all been fraud, and I do not believe that she should be allowed to get away with this. Kira listened attentively. "Can you prove this for me?" I pulled out a tape recorder, a folder full of emails, and several photographs without uttering a word. I pressed play. As the recording filled the air between us, I saw the flicker of understanding in her expression. The pain in my voice was unmistakable. I set the photographs in front of her next. I don't know if these would hold up in court, but they paint a very clear picture of what's been going on. These were taken in public places. As you can see, discretion wasn't exactly a priority for her. She flipped through the images. Her expression didn't change. Finally, she set them down. "I think we have enough grounds to proceed, Mr. Mercer," she said, standing up. "Immigration fraud is a very serious matter, especially in post-9/11 America. You did the right thing coming forward. We'll be in touch with you shortly." Her voice was professional, but by the look in her eyes, I just felt like something was holding me back. Maybe it was reckless, maybe it wasn't the right time, but something in me refused to ignore what I was feeling. "Now that the business part is out of the way," I said, holding her gaze, "would you have dinner with me tonight?" I saw the flicker of surprise in her eyes. She hadn't expected that. For a moment she hesitated, weighing the situation. "By the way," I said, "what's your first name?" Her lips tugged upwards in an almost smile. Kira Dalton." "Pleasure meeting you, Kira," I said. "Bruce." I think she was just weighing her words whether to grant a yes. "It's also not exactly above board to do work out of the office either," she finally said with a raised brow. I leaned in just a little, flashing her a warm, confident smile. "I promise no business talk tonight. No mention of my ex, no heavy conversations. Just dinner with good company. Even immigration officials have to eat, right?" She regarded me another second or so, and then she smiled. I waited for her response, keeping my fingers crossed. For a few moments, she looked at me as if trying to get something straight in her mind. Then, she heaved a small sigh, smiled hesitantly, and said, "Okay, but with reservations." "Great. What time should I pick you up?" "If you meet me in front of the building at 5:30, we can have an early dinner. I'll need to call my sitter and let her know I'll be a little late." She blew out a breath, shaking her head. "I can't believe I'm doing this, but there's something about you I trust, and I don't even know why." "You won't regret it," I promised, trying to contain my excitement. I felt like a teenager going out on his first date. I had enough time to head home, clean up, and still make it back without rushing. And for the first time in months, I actually felt good. Dinner was effortless. Kira was a bit shy at the start, then loosened up. We talked about everything in the world: life, work, family. The more we talked, the more it felt like we'd known each other for years. No awkwardness, no forcing of conversation, just connection. She spoke about her divorce and her 7-year-old daughter, Hannah. She shared her love of cooking and hiking with me, and I spoke to her about my sons, martial arts, and how much I love motorcycles. We were so different in so many ways, and yet, somehow we just fit. I couldn't believe the closeness I had attached myself with. She moves, smiles as she talked of Hannah. Something made me like her. The holding urge and yearning for holding her close cropped up within. A mind lapse was the consequence, for what if held in her arms, passion gleamed from those eyes. She caught my expression and tilted her head. "What are you thinking about? You've got this far-away look in your eyes," she asked, watching me intently. I hesitate a beat before speaking. "I was only hoping you're having as much fun as I am. When I look at you, I feel something warm, something I haven't felt in a long time. There's strength in your eyes, and passion too. From the moment I saw you, I felt a connection." She breathed softly, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "I feel it too," she admitted. "But this is going so fast. We just met. I don't even know you. Maybe we should take things a bit slower." I nodded. "That's probably the smart thing to do. Makes perfect sense. But I'm not overthinking it. I'm just going with the flow. If I ever come on too strong, just tell me. The last thing I want is to make you uncomfortable, or have you think I'm some kind of lunatic." She chuckled and shook her head. "No, actually, I'm flattered. I never really thought of myself as someone who stood out like that." "For the record," I said, meeting her gaze, "every woman I see from this day forward will come in second to you." She stared at me for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether I was serious. "I don't believe you," she whispered. "Look at my face," I said, leaning slightly forward. "Do I look like I am joking?" She didn't say a word. But she didn't have to. It was all there in her eyes. Then, just as that moment started to get weightier, she changed the subject. "How do you feel about what your wife—" She caught herself. "Your soon-to-be ex-wife did to you?" I exhaled sharply, the question piercing deeper than expected. I had thought I was past the worst of it by now, yet even now, it still stung. "I feel sad," I said, my voice lower, "hurt, angry. My ego's taken a serious beating, that's for sure. But most of all, I just don't get why she had to be so mean about it. I never got to try to make her happy. She would never let me. The deceit was one thing, but the continuous disrespect? That's what really burns." She threaded her hands together, observing me closely. "Maybe there is nothing more to understand than that which already meets your eyes. She is as she is. You are a kind, sensitive man. I see that. And you did not deserve what happened to you by her hands." I nodded softly, more pleased by her understanding than she might have known. "What would you like to have happened to her?" she again asked, cautiously. I tightened my fists, and my chest heaved with increasing tension. "She used me. She married me for a green card, among other things. I really think the only fitting end to this would be making sure that she gets what she deserves. A one-way ticket back to Istanbul, with nothing in the divorce." Kira leaned across the table, laying her hands over mine. I could feel her warm touch, the quiet strength in the way she held them. It soothed me, anchoring me into the present moment. The next few minutes passed, as Kira and I discussed what I needed to do to ensure that Camille faced consequences for her actions. Kira listened, but she also helped me hash out every little detail. I changed the subject again. "How did your ex-husband ever let you go?" Her face clouded. "He didn't," she whispered. "I ran. Instantly I tensed, on alert. He wanted me to be his punching bag forever, she continued, her voice even, just low. Luckily for me, I had other plans. The night he hit Hannah was the night I left. I packed what I could, took my daughter, and never looked back. That was 3 years ago. I swallowed hard. You made the right choice. I know, she said, the press of her fingers over mine growing subtly tighter. But that's not to say it was easy, either. I could see the strength in her, the kind of resilience that came with surviving something no one should ever have to. In this moment, I knew this woman was different. I'm glad he was such a fool, I said, taking Kira's hand a bit tighter. If he hadn't been, we wouldn't be sitting here together right now. At the thought of anyone hurting Kira, an unreasonable anger rose in my chest, but I let it go at the sound of a small band striking up. They sounded good. Would you like to dance, lady? They're playing our song. She gave me an arch look. Really? What song is that? Whatever they're playing, I said, standing and pulling her gently with me as we moved to the music. We swayed to it together, lost in the magic. Her warm body pressed against mine, wafting a sweet perfume that intoxicated me. She relaxed into me, almost as if this was where she belonged, in my arms. Enough. Her touch sent my thoughts flying, but I made myself stay in reality. This was different. It wasn't about escape or revenge. This was real. Don't worry about Camille, she whispered in my ear. I'll make sure everything is handled tomorrow. I looked into her eyes and saw so much more than passion. I saw strength, understanding, a future. Later that night, taking Kira home, the goodnight kiss we shared lingered in tenderness. I wanted her. She wanted me. Yet we both knew better. This wasn't the time, not yet. Much later that night, as I lay in bed, I could not get her out of my mind. Her face, the way she had laughed, the way she made me feel alive again. Was I already falling for her? I wasn't sure. But I did know one thing. Life goes on. Self-pity and regret had no place in my life anymore. I had wasted enough time, and for the first time in a long time, I felt happy. When I returned home, Camille was sitting at the kitchen table. I'm glad you're here, I said, sitting across from her. Friday is your last day. I'll be home by 6. I need you to be here because there's something important I want to say before you go. Will you do that for me? She eyed me suspiciously. Why don't you just tell me now? No, I said, standing up. I'm tired. I'm going to bed. I'll be glad to have my bedroom back. I've been in that guest room for too long. I should have made you sleep in there. I should have done a lot of things differently. I walked toward the den, turning on the TV, ready to put her out of my mind for the night. 20 minutes later, she appeared in the doorway. She stood in the doorway, dressed in something I once found irresistible, back when I was blind to who she really was. Even now, she carried herself with confidence, convinced she still had power over me. I hated myself for my body's reaction. Even now, my instincts betrayed me, but I knew better. This wasn't about love or passion. It was one last manipulation. Bruce, she said softly, stepping closer. This is your last chance. One night, no consequences, no strings attached. You know you want to? She stepped closer. I know you still care for me. I see it in your face. Can't we forget everything for just one night? She reached out, running her fingers along my arm. I stepped forward, looking into her eyes, as if I were considering her offer. For a brief second, I saw a flicker of hope. Then, I took a step back and shook my head. I wouldn't touch you if you were the last woman on earth. Her expression shattered, shock, confusion, rejection. I would never forget the way she looked in that moment. She had expected me to fall for it, to give in one last time, but her game was over. She had lost. And the strangest thing, I felt nothing. Not anger, not hatred, not sadness, just emptiness. There was no point in wasting another thought on her. She had already taken enough from me. That night, I slept fitfully, but with the rising sun, I knew exactly what needed to be done. At 9 o'clock sharp, I was in my lawyer's office. Okay, Bruce, he said, looking at his notes. I'll have your divorce documents ready by 3. What else? I didn't hesitate. I want to sue Felix Osborne for alienation of affection or intentional infliction of emotional distress, whatever sticks. I don't care if he didn't actually cause my marriage to fall apart. I want him to pay. My lawyer leaned back in his chair. That's aggressive, he said carefully. And what else? The bank, I said. They knew he was involved with my wife. They have a morals clause in his contract, and they let it slide. I want them held accountable. I want both lawsuits filed today, and I want to serve the papers personally, at 4 o'clock. My lawyer looked at me another beat. I hope you're not planning on doing something stupid, he cautioned. Things can get nasty. You have the legal right to serve him yourself, but you'll have to have a witness present. That's fine, I said. I've already got someone in mind. I wasn't looking for a fight, but if Felix did, he was going to find out just how badly he'd underestimated me. I hope it does get ugly, I really do. It's better if you don't know what I'm planning, I said with a look of steeled determination. I arrived at Felix Osborne's office at 4 o'clock. A clerk showed me where he was. I saw him leaning over a secretary, placing his face too close to hers. She was trying to put some space between him and her. He looked up in time to see me coming. As I walked towards him, I slipped into the relaxed focus that I call combat mode. Felix was about to experience some serious pain. He looked worried, then defiant. "What are you doing here, Mercer?" He was not going to wait long to get his answer. "I have some gifts for you," I said, handing him a copy of my divorce papers, naming him as the correspondent in adultery. He looked annoyed. Everyone in the office was watching. I handed him another document. "This document is a lawsuit charging you with alienation of affection, causing the breakdown of my marriage. And this is a copy of my lawsuit against your bank for allowing this blatant affair to continue in full view and knowledge of your supervisors in violation of the bank's morals clause of your contract." I gave him some of the explicit pictures I had of him and Camille. "Your boss really liked those pictures," I said with a smile. "Is that it?" He was really angry now. I could see the blood rushing to his head. He could barely contain himself. "One more thing," I said, walking away from him and stopping. "Your fiancée should be receiving these papers and pictures right about now by messenger service. I guess she is not too happy with you at the moment. I think she might want her car back." "Who's getting played now, buddy?" When he started charging at me, shouting, "I'll destroy you." I knew I had him where I wanted him. I smiled as he ran towards me with clenched fist. My day of retribution was at hand. The next several seconds seemed to move slowly. He rushed at me, fists clenched, but I was ready. A quick sidestep, a well-placed strike to his midsection, and he doubled over in pain. Before he could recover, I followed up, taking his legs out from under him. He hit the floor hard, his confidence shattering along with his pride. He wasn't done, but I had seriously upset his day. Lucky for him, I knew when to hold back. I could have done worse, but honestly, he wasn't worth the trouble. As the fog of battle lifted, I heard clapping. It seemed to grow louder and louder. The secretary that Felix had been harassing was applauding. This was followed by more clapping. I seemed every woman in the office joined in, and was happy that Felix got his ass kicked. Obviously, no one was shedding any tears for him. I stood there surprised by their support. "Call the police and tell them to bring an ambulance," I said to the nearest secretary. "I think Felix over here has a bad headache." She handed me a slip of paper with her phone number on it. She whispered, "Call me." The police questioned me at length. They couldn't understand how so much damage could be done to Felix in less than 10 seconds. There were 15 witnesses that said I had acted in self-defense after Felix attacked me, threatening to destroy me. Reluctantly, they told me to go home and that they would have some questions for me later. I felt good on the drive home. One of my tormentors had been dealt with. Now, there was one to go. When I arrived home, I called Kira and asked her to meet me at home when she got off from work. Camille showed up exactly at 6 p.m. She was irate. "Bruce, what the hell have you done? That scene you pulled in my office was humiliating. The office is talking about it. I'll lose my job. You almost killed Felix. I never knew you could be so heartless and cruel." "Cruel? You're calling me cruel? After what you did, and I'm the cruel one? You've got some nerve. He's lucky he's still standing," I said, forcing myself to stay calm. "Who is this bimbo?" she inquired, finally recognizing Kira's presence. "This is no bimbo as you put it. Kira is my very good friend," I said, putting my arm around Kira's waist and kissing her on her cheek. "Kira works for the Dept of Immigration and Naturalization." The look on Camille's face was priceless, and she began to understand something was up. "Why is she here?" "I wanted her here to wish you a safe trip." "Trip? I'm not going anywhere." "Oh, yes, you are. I said, opening the front door. 3 men waited outside, 2 G-man types and a short balding fellow. They came inside and immediately the short guy asked, "Camille Mercer?" "Yes." "You've been served. These papers are suing you for divorce for adultery." He turned and left. That left to 2 men in black. Her jaw dropped. She looked at me, then at them. She looked like she had just been sentenced to death. They showed their ID and badges and said, "We have credible information that your immigration status in this country was obtained fraudulently. Please come with us. We have a few questions we'd like to ask you." As she was escorted out, she stopped and turned towards me. "Bruce, you promised that you would never let any harm come to me," she said, looking for my protection. I hesitated a moment and looked at her with no emotion and said, "I lied." I closed the door on her and that chapter of my life forever.